Teraz chciałabym zaprosić, najpierw powiem po polsku, tutaj będzie kilka minut po angielsku, bo teraz wystąpi przed Państwem pan David Wilkinson, który był szefem kampanii Birch Group, która prowadziła kampanię przeciwko Vote Leave, która sprzyjała referendum, jeśli chodzi o wystąpienie z Unii Europejskiej. Mr. David Wilkinson, Campaigns Director of Birch Group.
Thank you. That's the best round of applause I've had for quite some weeks. It's also this is something of an honour for me this moment, because the last time I spoke to so many Poles was 12 years ago, something like that. Also at an event organised by Janusz Korwin-Mikke, and that was part of the campaign for Poland not to join the European Union. And that was a campaign before the referendum. It was a campaign which, unfortunately, we lost. I'm speaking to you now, of course, after a referendum, and it's one that we won. So I don't think there's much point in me now talking for ages and ages and ages about all the things that's wrong with the European Union and all the reasons that people should have voted for Brexit a few days ago. All of that has now been decided. Britain has voted not for Brexit, no. What Britain has voted for, what the British people have voted for, is what we were fighting for back those years ago at that meeting that was organised by Janusz Korwin-Mikke. When I was there with other British people and from people from other European countries, we weren't fighting for no friendship between Poles and British people. We weren't fighting for nothingness. We were fighting because we had a different vision of how all modern nations should interact in the modern world. It was a vision that was different to what we see in the European Union. So when last week, was it last week? I can't remember. How long ago was it? It was 4 days ago, something like that. We voted for the same thing that we were working for all those years ago, a different vision of how our nations should be friends. There's a couple of things that I think I need to say. Because I don't really want to make a long speech. I wanted to just answer questions that you might have of one of the leading campaigners in the Brexit campaign. But there is something special between our nations. When my father was in the RAF in the war, and for him, Poles were something special. And you can understand that one of the first Poles that I met in real life was Janusz Korwin-Mikke. I kind of understood what he meant, you know. But yeah, there's all the good things that we remember from the Second World War, how we stood together. But there's also something left with British people, a sense of obligation. You know what I mean. There is that special friendship, and you will know that now there is, in some places, some even animosity between British people and Poles. What a tragedy that is, and how only an organisation with the capacity for failure could ever, within a few short years, change what was a special bond between two nations into something that's on the point of falling out. It was a resistance against that change that British people really voted last week. So now what are we left with? We're left in a situation where we have to build a future. The referendum happened last week. The past ended last week. What we now have to do is build a future that's the kind of friendship that we were working for all those years ago at the meeting I talked about with Janusz Korwin-Mikke. That's what we've got to do. And I say we because this is an international thing. It's what happens now between Britain and Poland, between Britain and France, between Britain and Estonia. we've got to build that future. And that is not just a matter of British voices, it's a matter of Polish voices here in Britain. It's a friendship between our nations we've got to build. And you've got to be part of it. You've got to do some of the work. That's all I've got to ask of you. If there's any questions about specifics or boring bits about the campaign.
I've got a question here, I believe. One second.
Blue card.
Well, in EU Parliament they say, do you accept the blue card? It was a joke. Never mind.
No, I wouldn't go near the European Parliament.
The longer you'll live. Well, anyway, okay, so my name is Witold, and I've got a question about a maybe a slightly bigger picture. Before the actual referendum, I was kind of hesitating, because for me, one thing is the actual people's opinion, whether they wanted to vote leave or vote stay, and you know, is it based on some kind of nationalism or racism or any economical reasons. And then there is what the actual government and officials will do. Now, my humble feeling about the past referendum, the previous one, about the Scotland, was that it was actually fixed, because should Scotland left, it would have left with territorial waters on the North Sea with the oil. So it's more than obvious to me that it must have been fixed, because otherwise London would have lost the oil. I was really disregarding what the people think and how they voted. I was more concentrating on what the actual government wants and what kind of interest they have. So on one hand, I had something like they would maybe have some positions in the EU Parliament or wherever, okay, so that's a form of bribery. On the other hand, which is maybe going to go to that point, actually tons of money, the government, or I'm just in quotes saying government, will make on things like work permits, visas, you know, even exchange of passports, even for British nationals, and maybe there are a couple of other things. So, you know, on the other hand, also Poles, for instance, are the people who actually work, and if you look at all the socialism and all the benefits and all that stuff. So my question is, what do you think will be the impact for us as Poles in the UK in the next few years? Will there be a pressure to kind of kick us out, as many of Poles as possible? Or will the government rather keep us as we actually work for all the benefits and jobs and all that stuff? Thank you.
Well, first of all, this is England. You know, we don't do ethnic cleansing or any of that kind of thing. I think the idea that there would be this kind of wave of hostility where people are told they're not wanted and to go away, I just cannot see that. It's just not us. In any case, under international law, people who are living here now have acquired rights. Personally, I live most of my time in Estonia, and as a bit of a joke, I wrote, Estonia is such a tiny little country, you can just write to the foreign minister and they, you know, reply, they probably know who you are, and asked if Britain left, would I be subject to any reprisals, or would there be any difficulties for me? And of course they thought it was absurd, because why would they not want me? What trouble was I causing? Of course there is a problem here, and I think everyone understands it, and it works in two directions. It's not that the British people want to get rid of Poles, but there is a problem in the sheer numbers of people who've come into this country. That places a problem on this country. Everyone understands that. But that's only one side of it. Because, I mean, I can talk to you about these problems with no embarrassment whatsoever, because everyone understands them. But they also understand the other side of it, that I would like every single Polish person who wants to come to Britain to work, to come to work here. But come on, it's not like that. People are coming to this country not because they want to have a little bit of England for a while, to work and see some red buses or something, or because they like the weather. People have to come to this country and maybe to Germany because the European Union has simply not delivered on the promises it made 12 or 13 years ago. The basic deal was, Poland, vote to join the European Union and we will deliver certain things. One of them was, we will make your country into a modern, developed, shall I say even Western economy. And you will be affluent, you will be normal. That was the basic promise, and that simply has not happened. What has happened is countries like Poland have merely been made into a pool of cheap labour that can be shifted around. And you tell me anyone who would not sooner have a decent job at home, so that they can live with their families, live in their own towns. Yes, sometimes it's lovely to go to another country to work because you want to. When it is made a necessity that you have to, that is no right and it's no privilege. It's a necessity of life, yes, we must all accept that, and there's no point persecuting individuals who are just trying to do the best for their family and working, as you said, bloody hard for the British economy. But when we voted for Brexit, we voted because we understood there is something fundamentally wrong with the European Union system. And you can call it nationalism if you want. But I'm saying that governments in places like Poland and Estonia should be able, they should be free as a fundamental right of any nation to govern for the benefit of their own citizens, to make an economic policy that's good for Poland and only Poland. Good for Estonia and the people who live in Estonia with no other obligation than their own people. And that's what's wrong with the European Union, because it is not doing that. So, if that's any kind of answer, that's...
Since we voted to leave European Union, at least I did, we did. My question is, do you think it's a good idea to obtain British passports? I'm not saying I'm going to need it now or maybe in 2 years' time, but maybe in 5 years' time, it's a good idea to obtain British passports for us, Poles, living here.
Well, as a British patriot, I'd say it's always good to have a British passport. I mean, that's not entirely a joke, you know. I mean, when you have a British passport and a British name, things are different. You know, when I'm travelling in Poland, I mean, the car I have is actually an Estonian registered car, and I'll go places in Poland and people react one way. I mean, I'm not just talking about policemen. Well, policemen in Germany, they react in a certain way. But as soon as you produce your British passport, you know, and certainly in Poland, if you know, as soon as you're English, then you know it's a good time. People welcome you in. It's beautiful. But I know that's not really what you're talking about. It's life here. I'd have to say, as personal advice, yes. How I could imagine that someone would want to stop being Polish. I mean, maybe that's not the question, but I mean, I'd never want someone else's passport other than the Queen's, but... Oh, well, go for it then. Yeah.
You know, we will be protected. You know, for example, in Austria, if you want Austrian passport, you need to resign from another nationality. In our country, you can have two. So, for example, I can be Polish, I can go there to get my passport or get my ID. In the same time, I can get a British passport. You know, for example, my child now, we are applying for a British passport for her because she's here, but she's Polish as well because there is a law of blood. You understand? So we won't resign. I'm a patriot as well, and I would apply for a British passport, for example, just to keep myself safer in those times when we know what's going on. If you understand what I mean.
Yes.
But I will be a patriot for all my life, but I will have a choice. You understand?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all I can offer is personal advice on this. It's difficult for me to say as a matter of any kind of, you know, desired policy or anything, but as personal advice, I'd have thought it would have been a good idea. Sorry.
Right. I understand that you're British, and obviously, for that very reason, you may not be aware of certain laws that apply in Britain. I'm not making a joke or anything. All you guys need to do is to apply for British permanent residency. That's all. You don't actually have to apply for British passports. If you're patriotic enough, all you need to do is to download a form. I can't remember the actual web address, but all you need to do is to apply online, as in download it paper-wise. You have to actually download it and post it. It's called permanent residency. Costs you 65 quid. You have to send your passport in. It will take probably maybe even up to half a year now, because I'm sure there's going to be a massive influx of applications now. All you need to do is to apply for that. That's it. You don't have to actually apply for British citizenship. You don't have to. My question is, do you, because most people that actually that voted for Brexit were anti-immigration sort of situation. Do you not think it's about time that you explain to them that EU does not equal European Economic Area and does not equal Schengen? That these are completely different institutions. They don't equal. They are completely separate from one another. And the fact that someone voted against or pro-Brexit didn't vote against the European Economic Area and Schengen.
Well, I think one of the few successes the British government's had is staying out of Schengen. So I think British people kind of understand the difference between the European Union and Schengen. Pardon? I don't know, I think there might be. But as for the EEA, I think that was designed to be pre-in. So it was a situation for places like Norway that was designed as what they would go through before they joined. Since it has persisted with the Norwegians and other countries for so long, it has become an option in its own right. And there are people on our side, even within my own organisation, that say the basically the EEA/EFTA option is what we should go for. My own view really on these things, yes, I mean the fundamental lack of understanding among so many people is simply understand the difference between Europe and the European Union. The two words are often used interchangeably because there's a deliberate desire by the European Union to confuse the two, to say that if you're against the European Union, if you're against this particular regime, you are somehow against Europe, which is the mainstay of their propaganda. It is one of the great difficulties of our side of the debate that we cannot get this across to people, and we cannot get across to people, those differences between EEA, WTO plus, and all those different options. I agree, it's a difficulty. Well, you asked me if we thought we should explain to people. Yeah.
Do you not think that the entire Brexit campaign, is it not about time for them to explain to the people who even voted against, or even for, whichever for or against the membership of the EU, to explain to them that what happened is not is not against Europe, it is just against the political experiment, not the economical experiment. These are two completely different things, and you guys don't actually raise the very issue.
Well, wholeheartedly, I would say yes. You're right, we should do, and it is about time we did. Just it's not that easy, explaining things and getting them through the media is not that easy. I mean, you could come to a Bruges Group meeting and you'd hear people explain the difference all evening long, but actually getting it across to the public, it's a difficult job. So yes, we should, but no, we can't. Or, you know, we keep trying to, eventually we will, but...
Any other questions? I think it will be the last one because everyone is hungry and there is a grill with the sausages upstairs, but when David finishes.
I'll be at the barbecue and grill as well, so if anyone wants to ask me more questions.
Thanks. My name's Jan. What's wrong with Schengen? That's a quick question.
Well, I think if a nation does not have control of its own borders, it's no longer a nation. Simple as that. If once you join Schengen, you hand over a fundamental part of your national sovereignty. And in practical terms, look at what is happening on the Adriatic coast. People who are wanting to get to Germany understand that if they get to a Greek island, that's just a few hundred meters from the Turkish coast, they are in Germany. So we've had this, what's amounted to an invasion of Europe, made very, very easy. Because it simply doesn't work. The Germans have... I mean, it's what's wrong with Schengen. They have outsourced the defence of the German border to the Greeks. And the Greeks cannot defend that border. Nor are they particularly inclined to, after what the Germans have done to them. So that's what's wrong with Schengen. It's permitted however many millions of people who are not particularly needed in Europe to come to Europe, simply because the nations of Europe have surrendered control of their borders. It doesn't work. You can't do that. I mean, you could do it if the European Union took its imperial responsibilities seriously and deployed an army to its new border. If the Germans had given those tanks and submarines to the Greeks rather than lent them money to buy them for the privilege of defending Germany, that might have worked. But they didn't, did they? So it doesn't work. That's what's wrong with Schengen.
Just one last.
Is literally just the last one, all right? Quick one. Would you be able to nominate a person from like the politicians in Britain at the moment who would be a really good prime minister or a next candidate for a really good prime minister who would actually change the things around?
Apart from myself, you mean?
Yeah.
Can we go for a barbecue? You said one last question. This is, well, not Nigel Farage. Absolutely not Nigel Farage. I don't think Nigel Farage has the vision to take things forward. I think he's a populist politician who takes ideas from other places, packages them into a cheap way, and derives benefit. But he cannot originate ideas and policy. So he's a good protest politician, but as a leader, then quite frankly, no, not at all. From the Conservative Party, Boris is the obvious one. The Vote Leave campaign was really a Boris for Prime Minister campaign. Boris isn't the buffoon that a lot of people think he is. He successfully managed London for a long time. In terms of competence, he'd be as competent as any Prime Minister we've had since the last female Prime Minister. You know, you're looking at maybe Michael Gove, too many people hate him. Andrea Leadsom, maybe, people are talking about. If Graham Brady wasn't chairman of the 1922 committee, he's the kind of outsider compromise candidate. But I mean, I can't really see any obvious star, any leader. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult problem. And I think it's one of the problems, the fundamental problem with a referendum. I mean, people, when I've been chatting to people, have been talking about the fundamental problem of a referendum and the sheer disbelief. I mean, I couldn't believe we won. I mean, when you come to conspiracy theories, there might be a conspiracy that we haven't worked out yet why they let us win. Because normally they don't let you win. The whole system of this referendum was rigged to make it very, very difficult for us to win. People looked at the Austrian election and they thought, hey, come on, you can't believe anything anymore. When that poor woman got killed, again, that really raised suspicions, and how they pounced on that in such a ghoulish way and exploited it. We thought, come on, they'll stand at nothing now. So on small hours of Friday morning, when we realised we'd won, most of us just couldn't believe it. So you're left with this problem, though, that a referendum is a command from the people to the establishment to do something they fundamentally do not want to do, which is why, really, you need to have a revolution. So when you ask a question like, who could be the Prime Minister to see this through, it's such a difficult question to ask, because you've got to find a Prime Minister who is prepared to do something that is fundamentally revolutionary. And that is such an impossible question to answer. Nigel Farage. Vote for him then. But there is another. Well, I'm not altogether sure that Nigel Farage got Britain out of the European Union. First of all, we're not out of the European Union yet. All we've done is had an opinion poll that says quite a lot of people would like to get out of the European Union. And they knew that already. So we're still in. Maybe, but there were other forces at work wanting a referendum. And in any case, just getting a referendum only gets us this far. We're still not out of the European Union. One of the reasons we only just managed to win was the sheer unpopularity of Nigel Farage and the sheer stupidity of Nigel Farage and the greed of Nigel Farage. You see, when you look at most people who voted for Remain, they weren't voting for the European Union, they were voting against Nigel Farage and what they perceived to be an ugly, almost racist kind of Britain, kind of politics. If we hadn't had Nigel Farage taking such a prominent role, if we'd had someone more sensitive, someone more intelligent, someone more delicate in their thought, we'd have won by very, very many more votes. So I personally, I don't feel much gratitude to Nigel Farage in UKIP. Oh, he's intelligent enough, but he's intelligent in the way that a businessman exploits an opportunity. And that gives UKIP a certain success. But that isn't the kind of success that can lead a country, because it can only at best in an election get 18% of the vote, and that is a protest vote. So it can never take the whole country with it, or even more than half of the country to win an election. So the whole UKIP thing is a protest, a very effective protest, but there's a difference between protest and government.
Okay, if any of you has more questions, there is a barbecue. David, I'm sure if he'll have his lunch or dinner, I don't know if he's eaten today, he'll answer to them. Thank you very much, David, for your kind words about Boris. Please enjoy your barbecue upstairs.